Okay, last week we started a new series on the 12 steps, and we just introduced them, and tonight I'm going to teach all 12 steps, so you may be here a while. But I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the 12 steps, so hopefully you get a big picture in your head of what this is about. And by way of introduction, when I talked about it last week, I really focused that the 12 steps are more than just drugs and alcohol. It's about how to become healthy. And we looked at the fact that we are made to be biological. We have physical parts that function and a brain that's biological, but we're also psychological. And we're also very social, relational people and spiritual. And so any understanding of addiction and dealing with addiction really has to factor in and deal with all of those four areas: bio, psycho, social, spiritual. And one of the things that to me is a very positive thing about the steps is that they do acknowledge that we are bio, psycho, social, and spiritual beings, and they force us to look at each of those four areas. And so we're going to start on this journey. And it's really, again, about becoming healthy. How to become a person that is able to have healthy relationships, to be healthy psychologically, to be healthy spiritually and physically. It's all part of what recovery is. And so it's for way more than just addiction. Now, here's the problem. As you look at the 12 steps and you look at the path to becoming healthy, what you realize that it's not a path that is attractive to the average person. It is not a path that they say, yes, that looks so good, I think that's exactly what I need. No, it is a path that most people will not even want to consider. And here's what I think is the first and the reason why this path immediately turns people off. If you were to go to Step 2 and Step 3, which is really the starting point, and I'll explain Step 1's purpose in a minute. But Step 2 and Step 3 say we need a higher power to get us out of this insanity. Step 3 is we need to surrender to God of our understanding. Step 12 says having had a spiritual awakening. So Step 2 and Step 3 right out of the chute say you need to get healthy spiritually. And most people say, okay, sorry, not interested. I don't think I have a spiritual problem here, so I don't think these steps are for me. So that leads to the next question then. What is it that would bring a person to the place where they finally are open to consider the steps? That's Step 1. The only way most people will consider the steps as a viable option is if life is unmanageable and I am powerless and my life is going down the sewer. It is falling apart, and then all of a sudden what I might come to the place and say, you know what, maybe I need to consider the steps, which means maybe I need to consider looking at this spiritual dimension of life. So what I want you to understand right up front is this. All of us by nature are resistant to these steps because our world tells us different ways to become healthy. And what our world says is get the position, get the money, get those people in your life, and then life will be good. And the last thing we want to do is admit I need a spiritual center. And so most of us are not willing to consider it until life becomes unmanageable. And that we're going to look at in detail next week, but it becomes the key thing for people. And let me just expand on that, because sadly we need life to fall apart before we want to hear the truth. And if life isn't falling apart, we live in denial of the truth. And so that falling apart is painful like crazy, but it's the only thing that begins to open us up just a little bit to the truth. And this goes way beyond drugs and alcohol. This takes us to a person who has problems with food. And they got every other part of their life under control, but as soon as they start into that chocolate cake, they're powerless. And life is becoming unmanageable. Or it could be relationships. They got a good job and lots of money, they just seem to keep picking losers who end up abusing them. And they fall for it and fall for it. And at first they want to say, it's the other person, I'm a good person and I'm healthy. And after a while they go, maybe I'm powerless because I'm not healthy. And they're forced to look at that. It can go on. TV, shopping, gambling, you name it. You pick an activity, you pick a person or something that you are looking to make your life satisfying, and you will not consider the fact that maybe I'm unhealthy until life falls apart. And that's why, to me, these steps are for everybody. Because we all have parts of our life that need to become more healthy. And so that's why I think it's something that everybody can benefit from. Let me just give you an illustration from the life of Jesus that I hope might help you in appreciating what is being accomplished or what the writers of the steps were trying to accomplish. In John chapter 4, Jesus, at the very beginning of his ministry, he decides to go into the land of Samaria. Now, just quick background. The Samaritans were half Jew and half mixed stuff. And so the Jewish people, who were all about being pure Jews, hated the Samaritan people. And so the tricky thing, and some of you will appreciate this if you're a good addict, Israel, there was the southern part and a northern part, and guess what was right in the middle of Israel? Samaria. And so instead of, if you had to go from the south to the north, instead of going through Samaria, no way, those are bad people, not going to be contaminated by them, they would go east across a river, up north and back, just to avoid these corrupt people. I see people do that all the time. But that's what they did. And so Jesus says, I'm going into Samaria, and he goes into a town, and it's noon, it's hot, and he sits by a well wanting a drink of water. And a woman comes out to the well. And here's what you have to understand to really appreciate that. We know as the reader that this woman has had 5 husbands, and she's presently living with a 6th person. Some of you go, oh, that's my story. I understand that. The reason she's coming to the well at noon is important. You see, all women in that culture came to the well first thing in the morning when it was cool. If you come to the well at noon, guess what? You're an outcast. Nobody wants you around in the morning. You make everybody uncomfortable. They make fun of you. They call you names. They try to get rid of you. And so this woman is coming at noon in the heat of the day. Why? Because she's had 5 husbands and is living with one. And everybody can't stand her. Now, if Jesus had come 2 years earlier, let's say she was on her 4th husband, and Jesus had come and said, you know what, you got a spiritual problem. She would have said, not interested, take your own stuff and get out of here. Now, she comes on this day, and she's had 5 husbands, and the one she's living with isn't her husband, but she's in another relationship. Jesus knows that he can't just come out and say you got a spiritual problem, because we get our back up when we hear that. So just follow what Jesus does. I think it's kind of genius. He's sitting there at the well, and he says to this woman, would you mind drawing me some water? I'm really thirsty. And she goes, whoa, you're a Jew. What are you, a Jew, asking me, a Samaritan, to draw water? Don't you know Jews don't talk to Samaritans? And they definitely don't drink out of the same cup as a Samaritan. And then Jesus says this, if you knew who I was, you'd be asking me for a drink of water. Now put that in your computer, because it's like, this does not compute. You don't have a bucket, you're asking me for a drink of water, and now you're telling me you could be giving me a drink of water. Okay, I don't know what you're smoking, buddy, but you're not making sense. And so that happens, and Jesus says, I can give you water that will cause you to never, ever thirst again. She's going, now you're a salesman. I like that pitch, because I don't like coming here in the heat of the day all by myself to draw water. Would you hook me up with some of this water where I'll never be thirsty again? And Jesus says, go get your husband. What in the world's that got to do with anything? She says, I don't have a husband. Jesus says, yeah, you've had 5, and the one you're living with now isn't your husband. She goes, now you're freaking me out. And guess what Jesus is doing here through all of this? He is saying, woman, you're thirsty. You're not thirsty for physical water. You're thirsty for love. And you want to know something? He said, you're thirsty for love, but you're looking for it in all the wrong directions, in all the wrong places. What you're really thirsting for is not just the love of a man. You're thirsting for the love of a God. Whoa, that took her by surprise. But guess what happened? She listened. And she said, you know what? You're right. If I stop and think about it, all of my stuff with men really is trying to solve a thirst for love. I am parched. I am dry inside. I have been looking to satisfy that thirst in men, and it's not working. Maybe you're right that I'm looking for love, and I need to look for love from God. And she heard it, and she believed it, and her life was radically changed. Here's the point. Jesus never, ever would have been able to introduce her to the reality of needing to look at a relationship with God unless her life had fallen apart. And so what step 1 then becomes for an entry point into this is you're not going to listen to step 2 to 12 unless you're powerless, unless it's unmanageable, unless every attempt on your part to make life work is not working. That is the only time you're finally willing to say, okay, somebody please show me the right path. So let me walk you through that right path. And what Jesus did throughout his ministry is exactly what the steps do. It says the starting point, once your life has fallen apart, the starting point is spiritual. It is a relationship with God. So step 1, I have a problem I can't fix. That's the bottom line. I've tried, and some of you have tried for 20 years to find a way to fix it and control it, and you haven't been able to. And as stubborn as you are, you finally are coming to the place where you say, I'm powerless. I can't fix this. My life is a shambles, and I can't fix it. It hurts, it's humbling, it's humiliating, but that's where I'm at. Then step 2, what step 2 is saying is, I need help. But I gotta have special help. I gotta have help from somebody who's more powerful than I am. Because I, in all of my power, have tried to solve it and it's not working. So my only answer is somebody more powerful than me. And we've talked about that it doesn't have to be God necessarily that's more powerful. It can be a group of people that you connect with. It can be other things that help you with that. But for most, it has to be a relationship with God. That's the bottom line. Now, this is where most addicts begin to get try to play games. Well, they try to play games with every step, but this one is an important one, because here's what people think. Okay, I've tried to have my children as my higher power. I've tried to have my club room as my higher power. I've tried to have my sponsor as my higher power. Nothing's worked. I guess I need God. Okay, God, here's a little phone call. It's a service repair job needed. Would you mind coming and fixing my addiction? But when you come in the door of my house, you are only allowed to go into the kitchen where the fridge is broken and fix the problem. You're not allowed in any other room of my house. We got a deal, God? It's still my house. You're just fixing my problem. And what step 3 says, no, no, no. You can't work with God like that if you want to become healthy. You can't work with God like that if you want to get free of drug and alcohol and all of those addictions. What has to happen is it's not God as some repairman that you call in to fix. It's God taking over. It's God where you surrender everything to Him, your will and your life. And that's where a lot of people just stop. You know what? I'm prepared to surrender. Okay, let's say we'll go more than the kitchen. I'll give you half the house. But I'm not giving you 100% of the house. But step 3 realizes that if a person is going to become clean and sober, I have to confront a core issue. It's I'm running the show. And if I'm ever going to get healthy, I have to quit running the show and let God run the show. That scares the life out of most of us. But more than that, I have to have a relationship with God, not just a relationship with a repairman, but I need a relationship where God becomes a friend. A relationship where there's intimacy that is developing and growing. And then I need that relationship where I just surrender and I let Him have every part of my life. Step 3, some of you say, okay, that's enough, but we got to go on. Because step 4 and 5, now what we say, or let me just read it. We made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. We admitted to God, ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of the wrongs. What happens now is, okay, I need a relationship with God, but I'm still thinking the problem that my life is a mess is because of this addiction. And what step 4 is saying is, no, the problem is not that I'm an addict. The problem is I'm unhealthy. And so I need to begin to look at myself honestly. And I need to begin to take an inventory of the parts of me that aren't healthy. And that can be my relationships. That can be my personal habits. That can be any part of me. And it can include wounds from my past and all the unhealthy ways that I have tried to respond to that wounds. So I begin by taking this inventory of myself. And I want to see myself accurately. And that's scary. Because you want to know what most addicts do because of all the shame stuff we've talked about over the last year and a half? It's this. I don't want to look at me accurately. I'm hiding from me. I'm running from me. I don't want to be honest about me. Why? Because if I do, I'm afraid I'm going to be worse than my parents said I was. I'm afraid I'm going to be so humiliated and I'm going to feel so crappy that life will just kind of cave in totally on me. But what step 4 is saying is if I don't start getting honest and look at myself accurately and begin to realize how unhealthy I am in trouble. And that means not just looking at my good qualities, but at my ugly side. And that is a tough thing. But there's more in that step 5 that I want you to see. You realize what begins to happen here is this. The reason I'm unhealthy is because I haven't been following God's design. And so now when I'm looking at all the unhealthy parts, I'm going, bingo, I've been being my own boss, doing it my way, and becoming a slave to my own sick passions. I haven't been following God's design, which leads to freedom. So I don't just have a problem with me, I've been going against God and hurting Him. So I need to get that straightened out as part of all of this becoming healthy. So that's step 4 and 5. Now we go to step 6 and 7. Step 6 says we were entirely ready to have God remove all of these defects of character. We humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. Here's what begins to happen. I remember the first time I listened to somebody do a step 5. And so if you've ever done a step 5, basically it's you take what you do in your step 4 in that moral inventory, and then you share it with usually a pastor, minister, or a sponsor. And as that person began to do their step 5, here's what happened. They started out, I did this action. I did this action. I did this action. And it was all the wrong actions they had done. And as they got along in step 5, they started to cry and they stopped. And they said, I do those bad actions because it's me. It's character. It's me that's the problem. It's not just that I do bad things. I've got defects. And that's what step 6 and 7 is. It's one thing to say, you know what, I stole from my kids and I lied to my parents and I did bad actions, but I'm a really good person. To start to say, you know what, I've got a dark side that is really, really ugly. If I don't face that, and if I don't deal with that and ask God to somehow change me, I'm in trouble. And so it's gone from the problem being the drug to the problem including all the bad stuff I've done, to the problem being I've got a dark, ugly side that is feeding all of this stuff. And so I don't just need to change my external behavior, I need a nature transplant. I need something to change my very character. Wow, now we're going deep. Now we're getting really honest. But we don't end there. Step 8 and 9. Step 8 is we made a list of all the persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. And step 9, we made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Now you get to a very scary realization. I am not just hurting me by what I've been doing. I am hurting those that I love. Wow, that sucks. You see, if this was just a very little private thing, which every addict wants to believe, and I don't know how many addicts I've come, and in their first week of treatment, they say, I don't think I've hurt really anybody. And I go, okay, well, hang around for a few weeks, and I think you'll change your mind. But that's what happens. You begin to think, I just did it. I drank in isolation. I used in isolation. After all, I didn't want to share my crack with anybody, and I was paranoid of everybody. So I just did it all by myself. I don't think I hurt anybody. But then you begin to realize, wow, I hurt tons of people. I hurt my kids. I hurt my parents, my friends. I pushed them all away, and I did that. And so what you begin to realize is this. If I am going to be healthy, it's not just that I be healthy as an individual. I need to begin to have healthy relationships. And you want to know if you take that farther? If I don't have healthy relationships, guess where they take me back to? Relapse. And so if I'm going to be healthy, I got to have healthy relationships. And that says a second thing, and that's this. Relationships matter. You don't make it in recovery in isolation. You don't make it in recovery all alone. You need people. And that's scary because most don't know how to have healthy relationships. And probably some of you there saying, I just wish I had a healthy relationship with a member of the opposite sex. I'm not there yet. I'm just healthy relationships in general. That we really need to work on that. But step 8 and 9 gives us another thing, which is so important. You can want to have a healthy relationship, let's say with your parents, and you make amends to them, but they don't want to change. They don't want to face their stuff. They don't want to be a healthy relationship. They just want to point to you as the problem and to you as the screw up. And so what you begin to realize is this. I can want to have a healthy relationship till I'm blue in the face, but it takes two to have a healthy relationship. And in some cases, I may not be able to do that, but I have to be willing to clean up my side of the street. They may not be willing to face their stuff, but I have to look at my stuff. And then step 10 and 11. We continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. And then 11, we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. Recovery involves just stopping and looking at me, but once I begin to face my unhealthiness and begin to deal with stuff from my past, I then realize that recovery has to be a daily thing. We said before that the problem isn't so much stopping, the problem is staying stopped. And that takes daily stuff. That means that I have a tendency as a person to get off track very easily. I have a tendency to disconnect from my emotions and starting to stuff again. I have a tendency to disconnect from my thinking. And I have a tendency to get into bad head spaces and to drift back to old behaviors. And so if I don't on a daily basis stay on top of that stuff, I'm in trouble. But more than that, I have a tendency for my passion for recovery and to be clean and healthy, it grows cold very quickly. And so I need on a daily basis to do things that will keep my heart and the fire in my heart red hot. And that's what step 11 is saying, is you need to do stuff that slows yourself down, that gets you grounded, that gets your fire in your heart hot by connecting with God on a daily basis, by bringing Him into every part of your life. And that is the daily stuff. So, recovery is dealing with past, it's dealing with me, and it's putting in new routines and discipline into my daily life if I'm going to make it. And then a final thing, step 12. Having had the spiritual awakening that comes out of surrendering to God and beginning to look at me and changing and growing and getting healthy in relationships, as I begin to experience that, I start to experience joy. I start to experience meaningful relationships. And for the first time, things are not in chaos constantly. That's where some of us want to stop. And guess what can easily happen at that point? We can make recovery all about me. Just like we made addiction all about me, we can make recovery all about me. And so step 12 says if you want to get healthy, you got to work on you, but you now have to serve. You now have to go and help other people. And so that your life becomes a balance of dealing with my stuff, but helping other people find this same path to healthy living. There, you got the 12 steps in 30 minutes. Isn't that kind of a neat when you get the big picture? And you begin to realize, hey, that is a path to a healthy life. That is a path that will lead to the promises that are given of that joy and serenity and all of those things. But let me say this up front. It is not an easy path. But more than that, everything in us resists every one of those steps. And that's why we need that constant reminder of step 1. I don't really want to deal with all of this stuff now and these steps, but I'm powerless if I go back. And we've talked about it over and over. It's that fork in the roads. I don't want to relapse because I'll die, but I don't even want to work on these steps because that's taken me to stuff that's just painful. I wonder if there's a third option. And we look around for years for that until we're back to the place where we say, okay, I don't want to do these steps, but it's the only option I have. And we start reluctantly. And we start really not knowing for sure what we're getting into. And at times we want to quit. But if we stick at it, you get to the end and you go, wow, I am so thankful that I have taken this journey and I'm starting to experience healthiness again. So I hope you look forward to it, maybe with mixed emotions and a bit of fear. But if you stick at it, I think you'll find it to be very health giving. Let's just pray. Father, I'm just so grateful because so much of what is taught in these steps just comes right out of what you have given us in the Bible as your guide and what you have laid out for a healthy life. And I pray you would help each of us to take this seriously and to do so with an open heart and an open mind and a willingness to change. Amen.